Hey everyone, this is Meghna, the founder at Teen Chapter. We at Teen Chapter are building a holistic teenagers community where we offer internships, courses, sessions, conferences to teenagers. At the same time, we feature unconventional and inspiring stories of startups which are started by youth and also teenagers who got into leading universities of the world. So today we have Katelyn Kai, who's an incoming Robertson scholar at Duke University. Hey Katelyn, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. So, without any further ado, let's get into the conversation. So, Caitlin, tell our viewers a bit about yourself, where you're from, what you studied previously, what curriculum, city, and all that.
Sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Katelyn. I'm from Scottsdale, Arizona, born and raised. I went to a high school called Basis Scottsdale, which is a charter school that almost acts like a STEM magnet school. So, I took a lot of APs in high school, even though I was primarily interested in government, public policy, and economics, which is what I plan to major in college. And a lot of my activities converged around that because even though I didn't take a lot of classes in it, it became my main focus outside of school.
Okay. So, what AP classes did you take throughout your high school?
I started taking APs as an eighth grader just because of the way BASIS was structured at the time. And I took 18 APs from eighth grade to senior year. I know that's a lot.
Yeah.
I wasn't even the person who took the most APs in my class. I wasn't salutatorian or valedictorian. So that goes to say how competitive my high school was. I think I took nearly all of the major ones. So AP Physics 1 and 2, AP Biology, AP Government and Comparative Government, AP English Literature and Language, AP French, which was my foreign language, AP Calculus AB, BC, AP European History, World History, United States History, AP Statistics. There are probably a couple more missing in there clearly as I took 18, but it was pretty much the core curriculum of the school that I went to.
If I took 18 AP classes, I don't know if I would be alive right now. But hats off to you for doing so many classes and acing it, getting into an amazing university. So, can you tell us a bit about your extracurriculars in your high school, which you did inside your high school and outside as well? Any research project or any internship, any startup that you have?
Sure, I'll start with the activities that I was involved with inside of school. So, inside of school, I was involved with a couple of different honor societies. So, in my freshman and sophomore year, that was National Honor Society and the Trium Music Honor Society. I then got more involved in the French Honor Society because I was pretty passionate about international relations at the time, and eventually ended the high school career as the president of that society. I was also involved with a couple of other clubs, primarily speech and debate. I've been doing speech and debate since sixth grade and invested a lot of time into it as both the captain of my team and a competitor. I ended up being ranked number 3 in the nation for my event and number 1 in my state for 2 years in a row. So was very big part of my life and something I plan to continue being involved with in college. I think my involvement with speech debate definitely helped my application stand out just because of how much time I'd invested into it and the fact I had started the speech portion of the club at my school. But to go to some activities I did outside of school, I was involved very civically. So I did the Arizona Governor's Youth Commission and my city's Mayor's Youth Council, both of which I found really valuable because I was interested in the officials that I got to meet who told me a lot more about potential careers I wanted to pursue. And I got to do a lot of volunteering and have kind of the backing of those organizations to do so, which enabled me to do some really cool projects around sustainability, mental health, and domestic violence. Other than the youth councils I was involved with, there were a couple of other organizations that were a little bit smaller and played more minor portions in my extracurricular portfolio. So I did the Hugo Bryan Youth Leadership Conference, which was really useful for my personal development. I also sat on the board of a nonprofit called I Raise Boys and Girls International, which I got involved with during COVID. But I would say the other 2 largest activities that I did outside of school were one, pageantry. So I was actually Miss Arizona's outstanding teen and then first runner up to Miss America's outstanding teen. Pageantry gets a little bit of a bad rep, but I got a lot of scholarship money from it, almost $13,000 just in cash scholarships that I can take to any school that I want to go to. And so for me, that'll go to graduate school. And it enabled me to be a state ambassador for the Children's Miracle Network, which is a really valuable experience. I got to talk to all different kinds of people from all different walks of life and really get to know a lot of kids in difficult situations and help their families. So definitely still holds a soft spot in my heart. And then for the startup part of high school, I promise I'm coming to the end of the list. I started a nonprofit called Invest in Her, which is a 501c3 dedicated to bridging the gap between men and women in leadership, economics, and public policy. So we primarily do that through a webinar series and by teaching financial literacy to underserved women. So both of those sort of come together to make sure that these women get access to resources that I got in high school, but that might not necessarily exist in their home communities or in their own high schools or middle schools.
Got it. Got it. Coming to Invest in Her, is it like a community for your town or your country, like, or is it like an international community where anyone can join?
Sure. So Invest in Her's starting story is a little bit unique because it began during the COVID-19 pandemic. So while we were a pretty small organization, our first partnership was with iRaise, the organization I aforementioned before, just because I had an existing relationship with them, and they're actually based in New York City. So it's like we crossed the country before we decided to focus more locally. And then we did a lot of partnerships in the Phoenix metro area, even going to teach in person, just because we really wanted to reach a group of women who might not be as attuned to social media or run in our own social circles. So we partnered with larger nonprofits. But right now we're kind of in an expanding stage as the co-founders scatter across the country to go to college. So if you're interested in joining Invest in Her, we would love to have you. Our social media handle is at invest.in.her on Instagram. You can see our recruiting form there, look at a lot of the work we do. It's really valuable and really meaningful. So if you're passionate about financial literacy, gender equality, public speaking, all of those speak to us on the team, and I think it'll speak to you as well.
That's amazing. We will link all your organization links, your links in the description of the video, and for the podcast show notes as well, so that people can reach out to you. And I have one more question regarding extracurriculars. So a lot of people do a lot of work or participate in a lot of activities to diversify their application while applying to a college. But some people that I spoke to, they say that don't do that, specialize in one thing, because universities will also understand that you're passionate about something. So what should an prospective applicant or future applicant do in terms of their application? Should they diversify it, or should they like go in one way, like specialized? For example, you really like speech and debate. So would you advise someone to just do speech and debate, like super professionally, go to national levels and all that? Or would you advise to like explore here and there a bit?
I would say when you're a freshman in high school, do a little bit of everything because you don't know exactly what will click. And freshman year, whether you're going into high school or college, is just a time to really figure out yourself and what you value and what you're interested in. So don't try and box yourself in too early. But once you find activities that click with you, whether that's STEM research or a science Olympiad, or you're more of a social science kid like I was, and you love speech and debate and Model UN and DECA and FBLA, then you can start to sort of carve out an application niche for yourself. I wouldn't say that you need to invest all of your time in a single activity or even just a few, because as you might have gotten, I did a lot of different things in high school, but I think I had a couple of connecting themes that ran through a lot of my activities. So one was an interest in public policy, civic life, and government. Another was an interest in community service and equity, whether that was between different racial groups or gender identities. And I think those two undercurrents really helped put together a narrative during my application, which the AOs saw and enabled me to get into a lot of the schools that I got into. So I wouldn't say that you need to heavily specialize, because some of the activities like I did, like pageantry, for instance, require you to be a jack of all trades. I'm still a dancer because that was my performing arts talent for pageants. And that didn't necessarily align with the rest of my application, but it was something I enjoyed and liked and helped keep my application diverse. So I would say do a little bit of both, but always know why you're pursuing an activity, because once you get to the drawing board for essays, if you don't know why you did something and you can't create a convincing story for the reasons why you pursued an activity or you want to pursue a major and a career, your application is just going to seem really pale and uninteresting compared to a lot of the other people who can write very compellingly about their passions. So make sure you know your why is my biggest piece of advice.
Got it. Good. I mean, amazing advice. And what's your favorite extracurricular out of all the activities that you did so far? Which one you really enjoyed, or which one did you think got you into a certain university?
That's definitely a difficult one, because I think speech debate and pageantry, and by extension, Invest in Her, were also important in my development.
Right.
I actually wrote my personal statement on a combination of all three, which I think speaks to how equally important they all were. So I would definitely say all three in some way really influenced me. The speech debate was super academic and hardcore. I did research. I competed really often. I actually did 7 weekends straight
Whoa.
of competitions during COVID, which was a lot. And I don't recommend doing that. Don't do that to yourself. But on the other side, pageantry and Invest in Her was really me being passionate about equity in my community and the ways that I could take my privilege and use it to impact the world for the better. And I think having those two sides of me really be shown off in my application, which with the range of activities that I did, was also helpful in showing who I was to those who read my application and helped it ring more true.
Got it. Got it. And what are the universities that you applied to, and when did the entire application process start? Was it in your senior year starting, or in the mid, or how does it work? And how many universities in total did you apply to?
My application process actually started a little bit earlier, in January of my junior year, not because I was actually applying for college, but because I was applying for summer programs. So I was a Bank of America student leader, and I also attended a summer program called the Notre Dame Leadership Seminar. For anybody in the United States, I highly, highly recommend it. I love the programs. I'm still best friends with some of the kids that I met, even virtually. So 10 out of 10 rating there. But those applications were really similar to college applications. And so I think that enabled me to kind of get a head start in developing my writing skills. But as far as the literal application process, that didn't really begin until the end of summer / the beginning of my senior year. I ended up shotgunning to 19 schools, which I also don't recommend, because looking back at my list, I don't think a good 5 or 6 of the schools were a fit for me. So a fit would be either me really feeling connected to the student body or the values of the institution, or me really liking the academic programs that that specific college offered. And I think many of the schools didn't necessarily do that, but I had gotten a little bit nervous after I got deferred from the school that I applied restricted early action to. And so I applied to a lot more. And some of those schools were great, and I ended up loving them when I was considering my final choice, but others were not. And so I would recommend having a list under 15 schools, because as much as the prestige of the Ivy Leagues and the top 20 schools may appeal to you, a lot of them will not actually be a good fit for your academic or career goals, or just your personality and what you want out of your college and social life. So I would highly recommend that you keep yourself limited instead of making the mistake that I did, which was spreading myself a little bit too thin and applying to way too many schools over winter break.
And would you mind giving like a list of the universities that you applied to and which you got in? Yes.
So for the schools that I got into the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, my state university, Arizona State. I got into Duke, Emory, Vanderbilt, the University of Pennsylvania, Notre Dame, Northwestern, Rice, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and Georgetown.
Okay. So why did you choose Duke over MIT or UPenn?
You hit the nail on the head as for what my final three choices came down to. I had visited the University of Pennsylvania and didn't think that the pre-professional culture was as much of what I wanted, even though I really liked Philadelphia. So it quickly became just between Duke with the Robertson scholarship and MIT, both of which I had liked when I had visited. So what ultimately did it for me was the academic offerings that Duke had, with the #2 public policy school in the country, a really solid economics program, and the Robertson Scholarship. So what the Robertson Scholarship allowed me to do was not only cover all of my room and board and fees and tuition at Duke University, but it also fully funded my summer experiences. So I could take unpaid internships or study abroad or just travel the world if I wanted to, which I couldn't get anywhere else. And it enabled me to take an unlimited amount of classes at the sister university, which is UNC Chapel Hill, which really appealed to me as somebody who is interested in public policy. Duke is a really unique and elite university. And while there are a lot of advantages, those kinds of schools can kind of act as ivory towers sometimes. And they're not really representative of what the world at large looks like. But UNC is a wonderful cross-section socioeconomically, racially, culturally of North Carolina. And I wanted to make sure that I could stay grounded, meet lots of different kinds of people, and talk to all different kinds of professors, which is what UNC's education would enable me to do. So even though I really loved the economics program at MIT, and I was totally enamored with a lot of the cultural aspects of the school and the fact it was in Boston, I think the Robertson Scholarship combined with just the wonderful offerings that Duke itself and UNC itself had really sold me on the school.
Right. After you were explaining me why you chose Duke over MIT, even I feel like if I was in your position, maybe I would. You've mentioned about the Robertson Scholarship, right? So would you like to elaborate a bit on it? What is a scholarship? What does it cover? Is it only for American citizens, or is it also for international students?
The Robertson Scholarship is for international students as well. Some of the really good friends I've met in the Robertson program already are from places like Kenya, the Caribbean, India, Australia, New Zealand. So clearly they come from all over the world. You do not have to be a United States citizen or even a resident to apply. It is a full ride merit scholarship. So it will cover everything except for your books pretty much at either Duke or the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. That's what makes the Robertson Scholarship so unique. There's a cohort of students whose home institution is Duke, and there's a cohort whose home institution is UNC. We actually will spend a semester switching and living at the other campus. So we really get a taste of both schools, which was obviously super appealing to me. As for the actual process to apply, you can get into the Robertson Scholarship one of two ways. You can fill out the Robertson application, which is 2 essays, letters of recommendation, and submitting your extracurricular activities, much like the Common App works. Or you can apply to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill early, or Duke in the early decision, and get referred from that pool into consideration for the Robertson Scholarship. And there are different formats for international students, just depending on where they come from. So for whatever country you live in, I would look up the Robertson Scholarship and just kind of see if there's any special relationships between the foundation and any schools in your country or your country at large. And then from there, there's a pretty extensive interview process. And once we were selected, we were brought to campus, and the rest is history.
That's amazing. It's amazing to know that international students have a chance of getting a full ride merit scholarship, and I'm sure a lot of people would find it helpful. And did you give SATs or did you apply as a test option student? And if you did, what was your score?
I applied submitting my ACT, so that was a 35. And I ended up being able to qualify for nomination for the United States Presidential Scholars. So that is based off of your test scores, the top 20 females and the top 20 males within your state. And from there, there's an essay process, and it goes through a couple of different rounds before you're selected. I ended up being able to be named a US Presidential Scholar, which was a huge honor. So that's another incentive to continue doing well with your standardized testing, because it can qualify you for additional awards, which can look really good when you're submitting update letters to colleges.
You're achieving so much. I mean, like literally I don't even know, but it's so cool to listen to whatever you're saying. And do you know any other scholarships that international students can apply to?
I'm not entirely sure that these scholarships are open to international students, although I myself applied for them. So for kids who are international, I would just double check the eligibility requirements. But I applied to a couple of different full ride merit scholarships, one of which was the Woodruff Scholars Program at Emory University. I ended up being named a scholar, but turned it down in favor of the Robertson Scholarship. There's a full tuition scholarship at Vanderbilt. There are actually a couple. I applied for the Cornelius Vanderbilt Scholarship, but there are other ones like the Chancellor's Scholarship. So I would just double check if an international student can qualify for those. You just had to write a couple of extra essays. It wasn't too much work. And I also applied for merit scholarships at Notre Dame and ended up being named a Stamps Scholar. So that was also a full ride scholarship. I'm not sure if international students qualify again, but I would just double check and look into it. And for anybody who's a United States citizen or resident, I applied and qualified. So I think it's safe to say that you do too.
Awesome. And throughout your, because application process, the entire journey is super stressful. Who motivated you in your family, whenever you're sad or whenever you got rejected from a university? Like, who was with you the entire time? Even when you were happy, who was with you? Who was like your greatest supporter or motivator?
100% my mom. My mom definitely did not fall into the classic Asian stereotype at all of a tiger mom. She was so supportive every single time I got deferred or waitlisted or rejected. It happens to the best of applicants. The college application process is super wild, so don't let it get to you. My mom always made sure that I got outside, had something good to eat, played with my dog, exercised, and that really helped my mental health throughout the process. Just being able to vent to her about all of the different things that happened and all of its challenges. So you can develop a really close relationship with your parent throughout the process, or you can rely a lot on your friends, which I did as well. So just being able to find somebody who can act as your rock, I think is really important. And for me, that was definitely my mom.
Awesome.
Inspired me to do my nonprofit and got me involved in so many of the activities that I found so valuable today. And I talked a lot through my college decision with her. So totally my number one supporter, and I love her so much.
Awesome. I'm very happy to hear that. Katelyn, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the video. So would you like to give any advice to students applying to American universities or any universities in general? Any advice that you have for them?
Absolutely. I think you want to have a very clear vision of what you want out of college, because that will determine what colleges you apply to and what kind of applicant you make yourself. So having a really strong idea about what major you potentially want to pursue, even if there's a couple of different ones, what kind of social life you want to have in college, whether you want to go to graduate school or not. and what kind of career you want to have, that will factor in to a lot of your college application process. And simply having a lot of peace with who you are and what you want, I think makes the college application process seem so much less overwhelming, because you can easily look at a school and say, that wasn't for me. Or when you get rejected, you can look back and say, maybe that school wasn't actually my dream school, which definitely happened to me along the process. And I think being really flexible with yourself, but also having very strong core values and a vision for what you want, is a combination that goes really well together, because you know then what you want out of an institution, what you don't want out of an institution, and also how to adapt to a lot of the challenges of applying. So definitely recommend doing some soul searching before you get into the actual college application process. So that way you don't feel overwhelmed, you don't feel too stressed. It's normal to get all of that anxiety. Everybody has it, especially when they're about to open a decision. So don't feel like you're alone, but definitely do your homework in preparing the best application and preparing why you want to go to each school. And best of luck to all the applicants.
Awesome. And I personally have another question. What are your future plans?
My future plans? Well, I plan to study public policy and economics at Duke and UNC, considering a couple of different minors. Maybe journalism is at the top of the mind right now, just because of the communication I always did through speech and debate. And then after that, I want to go to law school. I'm not exactly sure if I want law school or a PhD, or maybe even both, but I always just say law school because it's easier as somebody who wants to do government and public policy. But for sure, going to graduate school at some point and looking to get into the public sector when I'm out of school.
Got it. Got it. All right. It was awesome talking to you. Had so much fun. And thank you so much for being here. And anything to add, Katelyn?
I think I'm all good. Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
Same here. And thank you so much who stayed till the end. And we'll be back with another interaction. Have a good day ahead.